In a world where royal protocol dictates every gesture and social media captures every misstep, what happens when a future queen decides to throw caution to the wind? When Princess Catherine of Wales picked up a simple cowboy hat at a Windsor Castle reception, she had no idea that the next 60 seconds would change how the world saw the British royal family forever. What began as an innocent moment of spontaneity became a global phenomenon, breaking the internet and redefining what it means to be royal in the digital age. This is the true story of how one playful dance created millions of smiles, sparked international headlines, and reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful thing a princess can do is simply be human. But behind the viral video lies a deeper tale of personal courage, family dynamics, and the delicate balance between tradition and authenticity that defines modern monarchy. This is more than just a story about a dance. It's about a woman finding her voice in a world that watches her every move. The morning of March 15th dawned grey and unremarkable over Windsor Castle, with no hint of the extraordinary events that would unfold by evening. Princess Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue dress that her stylist had selected for the day's official engagements. The fabric felt heavier than usual, weighted with the expectations that seemed to grow with each passing year of her royal duties. Catherine had been awake since 5:30, a habit she had developed during her years as a working royal. The early morning hours offered her precious moments of solitude before the day's carefully orchestrated schedule began. She sipped her tea while reviewing the briefing notes for the afternoon's reception at Windsor Castle, an event celebrating the cultural exchange program between the United Kingdom and several American states. The guest list included governors, cultural ambassadors, and representatives from various American organizations promoting British-American friendship. Her private secretary, James Morrison, had emphasized the importance of this particular gathering. Relations between the UK and several American states had been strengthening, and there were significant trade agreements in the pipeline. The reception was more than just a social event, it was diplomacy in action, with Catherine serving as one of the key figures representing the modern face of the British monarchy. As she prepared for the day ahead, Catherine reflected on how different her life had become since marrying Prince William, the woman who had once been Kate Middleton. Free to dance at university parties and laugh without concern for photographers, now measured every gesture against the weight of royal protocol. Each public appearance was meticulously planned, every outfit scrutinized, every word carefully chosen to avoid misinterpretation. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the early years of her marriage, Catherine had struggled with the constant attention and the rigid expectations placed upon her. She remembered the countless briefings about proper posture, appropriate facial expressions, and the subtle art of royal conversation. There were rules for everything: how to hold a teacup, how to exit a vehicle gracefully, how to show interest without appearing overly enthusiastic. Her children had brought unexpected joy and a sense of groundedness to her royal role. George, Charlotte, and Louis had a remarkable ability to keep her connected to what truly mattered, even as the demands of public life grew more intense. But with motherhood came additional scrutiny. Every parenting decision was analyzed, every family outing dissected by royal watchers and tabloid journalists. The irony wasn't lost on Catherine that in becoming a princess she had, in many ways, become less herself. The spontaneous laughter that had first caught William's attention at university was now carefully modulated for public consumption. The carefree spirit that had made her such a beloved figure during their courtship was increasingly buried beneath layers of royal responsibility. William often noticed the change in his wife, though they rarely spoke about it directly. He had grown up in the royal fishbowl and understood the pressures intimately, but he also recognized that Catherine's journey was different from his own. She had chosen this life, which made both the sacrifices and the criticisms feel more personal. When she struggled with the weight of expectations, he found himself caught between understanding her frustration and accepting that this was simply the reality of their existence. The morning's engagements passed as they always did, a visit to a local school where Catherine read to children, followed by a tour of a community center that supported military families. She smiled at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions, and made genuine connections with the people she met. These interactions were the part of her role that she cherished most, the moments when the formal protocols faded, and she could simply be present with others. But even during these meaningful encounters, Catherine was acutely aware of the cameras clicking, the reporters scribbling notes, and the social media posts being crafted in real time. Every gesture would be analyzed, every expression interpreted through the lens of public expectation. The authenticity she craved seemed perpetually just out of reach, obscured by the performance that royal life demanded. As afternoon approached, Catherine returned to Windsor Castle to prepare for the evening reception. The grand rooms were being transformed by the events team, with flowers arranged to reflect both British and American seasonal traditions. The guest list included some fascinating individuals: a cowboy poet from Montana, a jazz musician from New Orleans, a technology entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, and various cultural figures who embodied the diverse spirit of American creativity. Catherine's dresser had laid out several options for the evening, each outfit carefully chosen to strike the right balance between formality and approachability. The American guests would expect royal glamour, but the British press would scrutinize any choice that seemed too extravagant or too casual. It was a delicate balance that Catherine had learned to navigate, though she sometimes longed for the simplicity of choosing an outfit simply because she liked how it made her feel. As she prepared for the reception, Catherine found herself thinking about authenticity and connection. The briefing materials had emphasized the importance of making the American guests feel welcomed and valued, but she wondered how genuine such connections could be when every interaction was filtered through the formal structures of royal protocol. She had become skilled at the art of royal conversation, expressing interest without being intrusive, showing warmth without being overly familiar, maintaining dignity while appearing accessible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the castle grounds as final preparations for the reception continued. Catherine walked through the rooms where the evening's events would unfold, mentally rehearsing the conversations she would have and the impressions she hoped to create. The weight of representation sat heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just Catherine tonight, but the embodiment of British hospitality and royal tradition. In quiet moments like these, she sometimes wondered what her life might have been like if she had made different choices. The thought wasn't born from regret, but from a natural human curiosity about alternative paths. Would she have become an art curator, as she had once dreamed? Would she have traveled the world without the constant presence of security details and press attention? Would she have been able to dance at friends' weddings without worrying about unflattering photographs appearing in tabloids? These reflections weren't melancholy, but they were honest acknowledgments of what she had traded for the privilege and responsibility of her current role. Catherine had found fulfillment in her charitable work and in representing causes close to her heart. But there was no denying that spontaneity and uninhibited self-expression had become casualties of her royal transformation. As evening approached and the first guests began to arrive, Catherine took a final look at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was polished, gracious, and perfectly prepared for the evening ahead. But somewhere beneath the carefully applied makeup and precisely styled hair was the spirit that had once danced freely at university parties, laughed without self-consciousness, and embraced life with unguarded enthusiasm. Neither Catherine nor anyone else in the castle that evening could have predicted that within a few hours that buried spirit would burst forth in a moment of pure joy that would captivate the world. The stage was set for an evening that would begin like countless others, but end with Catherine rediscovering a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. The reception was about to begin, and with it, a moment that would change everything. The grand reception hall at Windsor Castle buzzed with animated conversation as guests from across America mingled with British dignitaries and cultural figures. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the gathering, illuminating faces bright with the excitement of cultural exchange. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her silk evening gown catching the light as she transitioned seamlessly from one conversation to the next. Her first encounter was with Margaret Chen, a documentary filmmaker from California who had created a series about British influence on American architecture. Catherine listened intently as Margaret described her latest project, asking thoughtful questions about the challenges of capturing historical nuance on film. The conversation felt natural and engaging, reminding Catherine of why these cultural exchanges mattered beyond their diplomatic importance. Next, she spoke with Robert Harrison, a Mississippi blues guitarist whose music had been influenced by early British rock bands. His enthusiasm was infectious as he described how British musicians had interpreted and transformed American blues traditions, creating something entirely new that then influenced American artists in return. Catherine found herself genuinely fascinated by the cyclical nature of cultural inspiration, the way creativity crossed oceans and returned transformed. As the evening progressed, Catherine noticed something different about this particular gathering. Perhaps it was the American informality mixing with British tradition. Or maybe it was the genuine passion these cultural ambassadors brought to their work, that the atmosphere felt more relaxed than many royal receptions. Guests seemed less intimidated by royal protocol and more focused on sharing their authentic experiences and perspectives, She encountered David Rodriguez, a chef from Texas who had opened a restaurant in London featuring a fusion of British and Southwestern American cuisines. His excitement about combining Yorkshire pudding techniques with traditional Mexican flavors made Catherine laugh genuinely for the first time that evening. David's unpretentious enthusiasm was refreshing, and she found herself relaxing slightly, allowing more of her natural personality to emerge in their conversation. The evening's program included brief presentations from several guests about their work promoting cultural understanding. Catherine listened as a librarian from Vermont described a book exchange program between British and American schools, while a theatre director from Georgia outlined plans for a Shakespeare festival featuring both British and American interpretations of the classic plays. During a quiet moment between conversations, Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Sarah Melbourne, approached with an update on the evening schedule. Everything was proceeding smoothly, perhaps even better than expected. The American guests were clearly enjoying themselves, and several had already mentioned to other attendees how warmly they had been received. The evening was achieving exactly what the organizers had hoped: genuine connection and mutual appreciation between cultures. Catherine noticed a small group gathered around one guest who seemed to be captivating his audience with animated storytelling. As she moved closer, she discovered it was Jake Morrison, a cowboy poet from Montana whose work celebrated both the American West and the broader themes of landscape, community, and tradition that resonated across cultures. Jake stood about 6 feet tall with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of a life spent outdoors. His voice carried the distinctive cadence of someone who had spent years crafting words for both intimate campfires and large audiences. Jake was reciting one of his poems about the connection between the American plains and the British moors, drawing parallels between the experiences of cowboys and shepherds, between vast American skies and the expansive landscapes of Scotland and Wales. His words painted pictures of solitude and community, of traditions passed down through generations, and of the universal human need to find meaning in the landscape around us. Catherine found herself drawn into Jake's storytelling, impressed by his ability to find common ground between experiences that might seem entirely different on the surface. When he finished his recitation, the small group applauded enthusiastically, and Catherine stepped forward to introduce herself. Jake's eyes lit up with recognition, but his manner remained easy and unpretentious. Their conversation revealed Jake to be a thoughtful man who had spent considerable time thinking about the connections between British and American rural traditions. He spoke about attending university in England during his 20s, studying literature and history before returning to Montana to take over his family's ranch. His poetry had grown from this combination of formal education and practical experience, creating works that bridged academic understanding and lived reality. Catherine was particularly struck by Jake's perspective on authenticity and tradition. He spoke about the challenge of honoring the past while remaining relevant to contemporary audiences, about finding ways to preserve cultural heritage without allowing it to become mere performance or nostalgia. His words resonated with Catherine's own struggles to balance royal tradition with personal authenticity, though she couldn't share this connection explicitly. As their conversation continued, Jake mentioned that he had brought several items with him to share with interested guests. A collection that included traditional cowboy poetry books, photographs from his ranch, and some authentic Western accessories that illustrated the practical origins of what had become iconic American imagery. He had set up a small display in an adjacent room, he explained, hoping to give guests a tangible connection to the culture he represented. Catherine expressed genuine interest in seeing Jake's collection, and he offered to show her the items whenever she had a moment. The invitation felt natural and unforced, a continuation of their engaging conversation rather than an obligation or formal presentation. Catherine appreciated Jake's understanding that her time was carefully managed, and his willingness to accommodate her schedule rather than expecting immediate attention. The evening continued with dinner served in the castle's dining hall, where round tables encouraged intimate conversations between guests from different backgrounds. Catherine was seated with a diverse group that included Jake, Margaret Chen, a technology entrepreneur from Seattle named Linda Park, and several British cultural figures. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from the influence of British television on American comedy to the ways American innovation had transformed British industries. During dinner, Linda Park described her company's work developing virtual reality experiences that allowed people to explore historical sites and cultural landmarks from around the world. She had recently collaborated with several British museums to create immersive experiences of ancient castles and archaeological sites, making these treasures accessible to people who might never have the opportunity to visit in person. The discussion turned to the democratizing power of technology and how digital tools could preserve and share cultural heritage across vast distances. Jake contributed observations about how social media had allowed rural artists and craftspeople to find global audiences for their work, while Margaret discussed the challenges and opportunities of documenting traditional practices for future generations. Catherine found herself energized by the intellectual stimulation of the conversation. These guests weren't just representing their respective cultures. They were actively working to build bridges, create understanding, and preserve important traditions for future generations. Their passion reminded her of what drew her to her own charitable work and her role in supporting cultural institutions. As dinner concluded and guests began to move back toward the reception areas, Catherine realized that the evening had already exceeded her expectations. The connections being formed felt genuine and substantial, the kind of cultural exchange that could lead to lasting partnerships and ongoing collaboration. She felt proud to be representing Britain in this context, facilitating conversations that might not have happened otherwise. Jake approached her as the dinner crowd began to disperse, reminding her gently about his offer to show her the Western artifacts he had brought. Catherine checked with Sarah Melbourne about her schedule and discovered that she had about 20 minutes before the evening's closing remarks. It seemed like perfect timing to continue the cultural exploration that had made the evening so engaging. As they walked toward the adjacent room where Jake had set up his display, Catherine felt unusually relaxed and optimistic. The evening had reminded her why cultural diplomacy mattered, and had given her the opportunity to engage in substantive conversations about topics that genuinely interested her. She was looking forward to learning more about Jake's work and seeing the authentic pieces of American Western culture he had brought to share. Neither Catherine nor Jake could have anticipated that the next 20 minutes would transform what had been a successful diplomatic evening into something much more significant. A moment of authentic human connection that would resonate far beyond the castle walls and remind the world that even princesses need opportunities to simply be themselves. The smaller reception room that Jake had chosen for his cultural display felt more intimate than the grand halls where most of the evening's events had unfolded. Warm lamplight illuminated a carefully arranged collection of items that told the story of American Western heritage through tangible objects rather than mere description. Catherine's eyes immediately moved across the display, taking in the thoughtful curation that revealed Jake's deep understanding of both his subject matter and his audience. A weathered leather saddle occupied the central position, its worn surfaces telling stories of countless miles across Montana rangeland. Beside it lay an assortment of authentic cowboy gear, spurs with intricate metalwork, a lasso coiled with practiced precision, and chaps that showed the practical wear of actual ranch work rather than costume decoration. Photographs arranged along one side of the display captured the vast landscapes of Big Sky country, images that conveyed the scale and beauty of the American West in ways that words alone could not achieve. Jake began explaining each item with the natural storytelling ability that had captivated his earlier audience. He lifted the spurs, describing how their design had evolved from Spanish influences through generations of American innovation, each modification serving practical purposes for riders working different types of terrain and cattle. His hands moved over the objects with familiarity and respect, revealing someone who understood these items as tools and symbols simultaneously. Catherine found herself completely absorbed in Jake's explanations, asking questions that revealed her genuine curiosity about the practical aspects of ranch life and the cultural significance of Western traditions. She touched the leather of the chaps, surprised by their weight and the obvious quality of their construction. Jake explained how such equipment was still handmade by skilled craftspeople who maintained techniques passed down through generations, preserving both practical knowledge and artistic traditions. The conversation naturally evolved into broader discussions about the relationship between function and culture, the way practical necessities became symbolic representations of entire ways of life. Jake spoke eloquently about how cowboy culture had been romanticized and commercialized, sometimes obscuring the genuine skills and values that gave it meaning. Catherine connected this to her own experiences with how royal traditions were often misunderstood or simplified in popular culture, though she couldn't share this parallel directly. As Jake continued his explanations, he reached for what Catherine initially assumed was another piece of ranch equipment. Instead, he lifted a beautifully crafted cowboy hat, its felt surface shaped by weather and wear, into something that transcended mere headwear. The hat bore the distinctive marks of authentic use, a slight fade where the sun had hit it most directly, subtle indentations from years of handling, and a patina that spoke of genuine work rather than manufactured aging. Jake held the hat with obvious reverence as he described its significance in cowboy culture. More than just protection from the elements, he explained, a cowboy's hat represented identity, membership in a community, and connection to a way of life that valued independence, hard work, and respect for the land. He described the unwritten rules about hat etiquette, the way different styles indicated regional origins, and how the condition of a hat often told the story of its owner's experiences. Catherine listened intently, fascinated by the depth of meaning contained in what appeared to be a simple piece of clothing. The hat represented everything Jake had been describing about the intersection of practicality and symbolism, function and identity. She found herself thinking about her own relationship with symbolic clothing, the way her outfits communicated messages about formality, accessibility, tradition, and modernity, often without conscious intention on her part, without really planning the gesture. Catherine reached toward the hat, asking if she could examine it more closely. Jake's face lit up with pleasure at her interest, and he immediately offered to let her hold it. The hat felt substantial in her hands, heavier than she had expected, with a texture that spoke of quality materials and expert craftsmanship. She could see the subtle details that mass-produced versions would never capture: the precise stitching, the hand-shaped crown, the sweatband worn smooth by years of use. Jake encouraged her to try the hat on, suggesting that she couldn't truly understand its significance without experiencing how it felt to wear such an iconic piece of Western gear. His invitation was made with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely excited to share his passion rather than any sense of presumption about royal protocol.
Catherine found herself charmed by his authentic desire to provide her with a complete cultural experience.
She glanced around the room, noting that several other guests had wandered in during their conversation and were now observing their interaction with interest. Among them was Linda Park, the technology entrepreneur, who had her smartphone readily accessible, as people of her generation typically did. The presence of other guests made the moment feel more natural somehow, less like a formal demonstration, and more like the kind of spontaneous cultural exchange that made these events valuable. With a slight laugh at her own boldness, Catherine placed the cowboy hat on her head, adjusting it carefully to sit properly. The weight of it felt strange initially, but not unpleasant. Jake stepped back slightly to observe the effect, grinning broadly at how natural she looked wearing such an unexpected accessory. Several other guests expressed delight at the sight, commenting on how well the hat suited her and how refreshing it was to see such an unguarded moment of cultural participation. The hat seemed to transform something in Catherine's demeanor almost immediately. Perhaps it was the novelty of wearing something so completely outside her usual experience, or maybe it was the relaxed atmosphere that had characterized the entire evening. But she felt a lightness that had been absent from her royal duties for longer than she cared to acknowledge. The weight of constant observation and expectation seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a sense of playfulness that she rarely allowed herself to express in public settings. Jake, delighted by Catherine's obvious enjoyment of the experience, began describing some of the traditional dances that were part of Western celebrations. His descriptions were animated and engaging, painting pictures of barn dances, rodeo celebrations, and community gatherings where music and movement brought people together across generations and social boundaries. He spoke about the way these dances preserved community traditions while providing outlets for joy and connection. As Jake described a particular line dance that had been popular at ranch celebrations for decades, he began demonstrating some of the basic steps. His movements were surprisingly graceful for a man who spent most of his time working cattle, revealing the natural rhythm that came from years of participating in community celebrations. Other guests began watching with amusement and interest, drawn by the infectious enthusiasm of Jake's impromptu demonstration. Catherine found herself laughing at Jake's spirited performance, genuinely delighted by his unself-conscious willingness to share this aspect of his culture. The combination of the hat, the relaxed atmosphere, and Jake's infectious enthusiasm created a moment of pure joy that felt completely removed from the formal structures that usually governed her public interactions. For perhaps the first time in years, she felt like she was simply enjoying herself without calculation or concern for how her behavior might be perceived or interpreted. The music from the main reception hall provided a distant soundtrack to the scene, and Jake commented that the rhythm was actually quite similar to some traditional Western dance music. Almost without thinking, Catherine began moving slightly to the beat, her natural sense of rhythm responding to the music and Jake's continued demonstration of dance steps. What happened next would be debated, analyzed, and celebrated for months to come. Whether it was the infectious joy of the moment, the liberating effect of wearing the cowboy hat, or simply the culmination of an evening that had already exceeded all expectations, Catherine found herself actually dancing. Not the careful measured movements that royal protocol typically demanded, but genuine, uninhibited dancing that expressed pure happiness and cultural appreciation. The room fell silent, except for the distant music and Catherine's laughter as she embraced the moment completely, her royal composure temporarily set aside in favor of authentic human joy. Jake continued his demonstration with increased enthusiasm, clearly delighted that he had succeeded in creating such a genuine moment of cultural connection. Other guests watched in amazement, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary and unprecedented. Linda Park, recognizing the historic nature of the moment, quietly activated her smartphone's video function, capturing what would soon become the most viewed royal video in internet history. But in that moment, the technology was secondary to the simple human truth unfolding before everyone's eyes. A princess had remembered how to be a person, and the result was magical. Linda Park's finger hesitated for only a moment before she pressed record on her smartphone. As a technology entrepreneur, she had an instinctive understanding of momentous occasions and their potential impact in the digital age. What unfolded before her camera was extraordinary, not just for its spontaneity, but for its revelation of authentic humanity within the careful constraints of royal protocol. The Princess of Wales, wearing a weathered Montana cowboy hat and moving with uninhibited joy, represented everything that social media audiences craved: genuine emotion, unexpected moments, and the universal appeal of someone simply enjoying themselves. The video captured 63 seconds of pure magic. Catherine's movements were natural and unself-conscious, her laughter genuine and infectious. Jake Morrison continued his enthusiastic demonstration of Western dance steps, clearly delighted to have created such a moment of cultural connection. Other guests visible in the frame watched with expressions of amazement and delight, their faces reflecting the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. The lighting was perfect, the audio clear, and the composition naturally cinematic, all factors that would contribute to the video's eventual viral success. Linda had built her career understanding how content spreads across digital platforms, but even she couldn't have predicted the velocity and scale of what would happen next. Within minutes of the evening's conclusion, she found herself facing a decision that would reshape the entire narrative of the event. The video was remarkable, historic, and undeniably authentic, but it also featured a member of the British royal family in a moment of complete spontaneity that had been captured without explicit permission. The ethical considerations were complex. Linda had been invited to Windsor Castle as a representative of American innovation and cultural exchange. The video had been captured in a semi-private setting during what was essentially a diplomatic event. While the gathering included multiple guests and wasn't technically a private conversation, there remained questions about whether sharing such intimate moments respected appropriate boundaries between public and personal spaces. However, Linda also recognized that the video represented something genuinely positive and humanizing. Catherine's joy was unmistakable, her cultural appreciation sincere, and the overall effect would likely be overwhelmingly beneficial for both the princess personally and the institution of monarchy more broadly. The video showed the royal family as approachable, culturally engaged, and genuinely interested in building connections across international boundaries. After consulting with Margaret Chen, the documentary filmmaker who had become a trusted conversation partner during the evening, Linda decided to share the video. Margaret's experience with ethical storytelling and cultural documentation provided valuable perspective on the potential positive impact of showing authentic moments of cultural exchange. Together, they crafted a social media post that celebrated the evening's success while highlighting Catherine's genuine appreciation for American Western culture. Linda's initial post on Twitter included the video with a caption that read, "Incredible evening at Windsor Castle celebrating UK-US cultural exchange. Princess Catherine's genuine joy and appreciation for cowboy culture from Montana poet Jake Morrison shows what these connections are really about. Pure happiness and cultural understanding. Thank you for such warm hospitality, Your Royal Highness." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first hour, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. By morning, the number had reached 5 million. Traditional media outlets picked up the story throughout the night, with morning television programs featuring the video as their lead entertainment story. International news organizations quickly followed, recognizing the global appeal of such an unexpectedly delightful royal moment. The reaction across social media platforms was uniformly positive, a rarity in the typically polarized landscape of online discourse about the royal family. Comments praised Catherine's authenticity, celebrated the successful cultural exchange, and expressed delight at seeing such genuine joy from a public figure typically constrained by formal protocol. The cowboy hat became an instant symbol, with fashion bloggers and cultural commentators analyzing everything from its authentic craftsmanship to its symbolic significance in bridging cultural divides. Jake Morrison woke up in his London hotel to discover that his quiet life as a Montana cowboy poet had been transformed overnight. His phone buzzed continuously with interview requests from media outlets around the world, all seeking to understand the man who had inspired such a remarkable moment. Jake's initial reaction was bewilderment, followed by concern about whether the attention might somehow reflect poorly on Catherine or the royal family. His worries proved unfounded, as the global response remained overwhelmingly positive throughout the following days. Television interviews revealed Jake to be exactly the thoughtful, authentic person his poetry suggested, a man genuinely passionate about cultural exchange who had been as surprised and delighted by Catherine's response as everyone else. His descriptions of the evening emphasized Catherine's genuine curiosity about American Western culture and her natural warmth in personal interactions. Meanwhile, at Windsor Castle, Catherine's morning began with James Morrison's urgent briefing about the viral video. Her initial reaction was complex, part embarrassment at having such a spontaneous moment captured and shared globally, part concern about how the royal household would respond to such an unexpected development, and part genuine pleasure at the overwhelmingly positive public reaction. She had known that Linda Park was recording something, but hadn't fully considered the implications of that video being shared widely. The royal communications team found themselves in uncharted territory. Traditional crisis management protocols didn't apply when the crisis was entirely positive public response to authentic royal behavior. Palace Communications Director Sir Adrian Pemberton called an emergency meeting to discuss how to respond to the unprecedented situation of a viral royal video that was generating universal praise rather than controversy. After consultation with senior palace officials and careful review of the video content, the decision was made to embrace the moment rather than attempt to manage or minimize it. The official royal social media accounts shared Linda's original video with their own caption. The Princess of Wales enjoyed learning about American Western culture during last night's reception celebrating UK-US cultural exchange at Windsor Castle. Thank you to all our American guests for such an enlightening evening. This official acknowledgement amplified the video's reach exponentially. Royal social media accounts commanded massive followings, and the palace's decision to celebrate rather than downplay the moment sent a powerful message about the monarchy's comfort with authentic public engagement. The video's view count exceeded 50 million within 72 hours, making it one of the most watched royal videos in internet history. Television programs around the world featured segments analyzing the video's impact on public perception of the royal family. Cultural commentators noted how Catherine's spontaneous dance represented a departure from traditional royal reserve, suggesting a more accessible and relatable monarchy for the digital age. Fashion experts discussed the symbolism of the cowboy hat, while dance instructors offered tutorials for viewers wanting to learn the Western steps that had inspired Catherine's performance. The economic impact was immediate and substantial. Tourism officials in Montana reported significant increases in inquiries about visiting Jake Morrison's region, with many potential visitors specifically mentioning their interest in experiencing authentic cowboy culture after seeing Catherine's enthusiastic response. British tourism likewise benefited as international visitors expressed increased interest in royal residences and cultural events. After seeing such an appealing glimpse into palace life, academic institutions began analyzing the video as a case study in effective cultural diplomacy and the power of authentic moments in international relations. The spontaneous dance had accomplished more positive publicity for UK-US relations than years of carefully orchestrated diplomatic events. Catherine's genuine joy and cultural appreciation had created connections and goodwill that traditional formal ceremonies rarely achieved. Publishers contacted Jake Morrison about potential book deals, while cultural organizations on both sides of the Atlantic proposed collaborative projects inspired by the evening's success. The video had created a template for cultural exchange that emphasized authenticity and personal connection over formal protocol, inspiring similar events and approaches to international cultural diplomacy. For Catherine personally, the global response was both overwhelming and liberating. The video had shown the world a side of her personality that she had feared might not be appropriate for public consumption, yet the reaction had been universally positive. Messages of appreciation poured in from around the world, with people expressing gratitude for her willingness to show genuine humanity and joy. Many comments specifically noted how her authentic response had brightened their day and reminded them that even princesses could experience simple human pleasures. The success of the video also sparked conversations within the royal family about the balance between tradition and authenticity in public engagements. William expressed pride in his wife's natural warmth and cultural curiosity, while other family members noted how Catherine's spontaneous moment had generated more positive attention than many carefully planned events. The viral video had inadvertently demonstrated the public's hunger for authentic royal moments and the powerful impact of genuine human connection. As the initial wave of attention began to settle into sustained interest, it became clear that Catherine's cowboy hat dance had created something far more significant than a viral moment. It had redefined expectations for royal behavior in the digital age and demonstrated that authenticity, rather than being a liability for public figures, could be their greatest asset in connecting with global audiences hungry for genuine human moments. 6 months after the viral video transformed Catherine from a carefully managed royal figure into a global symbol of authentic joy, the impact continued to resonate in ways no one could have anticipated. The cowboy hat that had started it all now resided in a place of honor at the Montana Historical Society, donated by Jake Morrison as a symbol of international friendship and cultural understanding. Visitors from around the world made pilgrimages to see the simple piece of felt that had captured imaginations and hearts across continents. Catherine's approach to public engagements had fundamentally shifted in the months following her unexpected internet fame. The overwhelming positive response to her spontaneous moment had given her permission to embrace a more natural and expressive public persona. Royal events now featured moments of genuine laughter, unscripted conversations, and the kind of authentic interactions that made headlines for their warmth rather than their adherence to protocol. The transformation was most visible during a children's charity event in September, where Catherine surprised everyone by joining a group of young dancers performing traditional folk dances from various cultures. The children had been nervous about performing for the princess, but when she asked if she could learn some of the steps, their excitement was infectious. Video of Catherine attempting Irish step dancing with 8-year-old instructors became another viral sensation, but this time, the palace was prepared and actively encouraged the sharing. William often marveled at the change in his wife's public confidence. The woman who had once measured every gesture against potential criticism now moved through royal duties with a natural grace that came from being comfortable in her own skin. Their private conversations revealed how liberating the cowboy hat moment had been for Catherine personally. She had discovered that the public not only accepted but actively celebrated her authentic self, freeing her from years of self-imposed constraints. The diplomatic impact of Catherine's viral moment continued to pay dividends throughout the year. The US ambassador to the United Kingdom reported that cultural exchange applications had increased by 300%, with many applicants specifically citing Catherine's enthusiastic reception of American culture as inspiration for their own cross-cultural projects. Universities on both sides of the Atlantic developed new programs focused on authentic cultural immersion rather than formal academic exchange. Jake Morrison found himself transformed from an obscure cowboy poet into an unlikely ambassador for rural American culture. His speaking engagements took him to universities, cultural centers, and international conferences, where he shared insights about the importance of preserving authentic traditions while remaining open to cultural exchange. His poetry readings now drew audiences who came as much to hear about his experience with Catherine as to appreciate his literary work. The Montana ranch, where Jake had learned the traditions he shared that night at Windsor Castle, became a destination for cultural tourists seeking authentic Western experiences. Visitors came from Japan, Germany, Australia, and dozens of other countries, many bringing videos of Catherine's dance to show local cowboys who had become minor celebrities simply by association with their region's sudden international fame. Publishers had indeed approached Jake about book opportunities, resulting in a collection of his poetry that became an unexpected bestseller. Dancing Across Cultures, Poems from Big Sky Country, featured the cowboy poetry that had first attracted attention at Windsor Castle, along with new works inspired by his subsequent travels and cultural exchanges. The book's success led to poetry readings in settings Jake had never imagined, from the Kennedy Center to the Edinburgh Festival. Catherine herself received hundreds of invitations to cultural events around the world, with organizers hoping to recreate the magic of that March evening at Windsor Castle. While royal protocol prevented her from accepting most of these invitations, the palace began incorporating more cultural immersion experiences into official visits. Catherine's trip to Canada in October featured traditional Indigenous dancing, while a state visit to Ireland included impromptu participation in a ceilidh that delighted both locals and international media. The fashion impact of Catherine's viral moment proved equally significant. Cowboy hats experienced an unexpected surge in popularity, with high-end fashion houses creating luxury versions of the working hat that had started the phenomenon. Catherine herself received dozens of hats from craftspeople around the world, though palace protocol required that most be donated to museums or cultural institutions rather than kept for personal use. More importantly, the incident had sparked broader conversations about authenticity in public life. Political figures, celebrities, and business leaders found themselves under increased pressure to demonstrate genuine personality rather than carefully managed public personas. The Catherine effect became shorthand for the positive impact of authentic behavior in an era of increasing skepticism about public figures. Academic studies emerged analyzing the viral video's impact on public perception of monarchy and authority figures more broadly. Research conducted by the University of Oxford Centre for Public Opinion found that Catherine's spontaneous dance had improved global perceptions of the British royal family by measurable amounts, with particularly strong positive responses in younger demographics who had previously viewed the monarchy as outdated or irrelevant. The video continued to circulate on social media platforms, often repurposed for various celebrations and cultural events. Wedding planners reported increased requests for Western-themed elements, while dance instructors noted growing interest in line dancing and country music. The simple joy captured in those 63 seconds had inspired people to seek similar moments of uninhibited happiness in their own lives. Catherine's charitable work benefited enormously from her enhanced public profile and the goodwill generated by the viral moment. Donations to her supported charities increased significantly, with many contributors specifically mentioning how much her authentic joy had meant to them during difficult times. The video had humanized not just Catherine personally, but the entire concept of charitable work and public service. International relations experts noted that Catherine's cultural appreciation had achieved more positive publicity for Anglo-American relations than years of formal diplomatic efforts. The video was frequently referenced in discussions about effective public diplomacy and the power of personal connections in international relations. Several countries began incorporating more cultural immersion experiences into their own diplomatic programming, hoping to achieve similar positive outcomes. The anniversary of the viral video prompted reflection on its lasting significance. Media outlets produced retrospective pieces analyzing how the moment had changed public expectations for royal behavior, while cultural commentators noted its impact on discussions about authenticity and public life. The video had become a touchstone for those arguing that genuine human moments were more powerful than carefully orchestrated public relations campaigns. Catherine herself marked the anniversary by returning to Windsor Castle for another cultural exchange event, this time featuring artists and cultural figures from across the Commonwealth. While no single moment from the anniversary event achieved viral status, the entire evening was characterized by the natural warmth and authentic engagement that had become Catherine's signature approach to public duties. Jake Morrison was invited to attend the anniversary celebration, bringing his guitar instead of cowboy gear. His performance of an original song about building bridges across cultures received a standing ovation from guests who understood they were witnessing the continuing evolution of that magical March evening when a princess remembered how to dance. As Catherine reflected on the year that followed her unexpected internet fame, she realized that the cowboy hat had given her something far more valuable than viral popularity. It had returned to her the confidence to be genuinely herself in public settings, to trust that authenticity would be appreciated rather than criticized, and to understand that her role as a modern royal could include moments of pure human joy. The video remained online, continuing to bring smiles to viewers around the world who discovered it for the first time or returned to it when they needed reminding that even in the most formal settings, there was room for spontaneity, cultural appreciation, and the simple pleasure of dancing like nobody was watching, even when, as it turned out, everybody was. The legacy of those 63 seconds would continue far beyond any single anniversary, serving as a reminder that the most powerful moments in public life often come not from careful planning, but from the courage to be authentically human when the opportunity presents itself. Catherine's cowboy hat dance had become more than a viral video. It was a masterclass in the power of genuine joy to transcend cultural boundaries and create connections that no amount of formal diplomacy could achieve.